I have some questions for you, Mr. Harris.
Yes, of course.
Tell me everything you can about the kidnapping.
I don't know much. I was out last night while it happened.
Where had you been previously?
I was out with friends. My wife can verify the time I arrived home.
Wait a minute. I know this attitude all too well. This man is hiding something, most likely from his wife. I doubt his voice is from beyond the grave, so the question is, what's his secret?
I found this bit of torn fabric by the broken window. Do you know anything about it?
Looks like it came from a piece of clothing. Possibly a jacket.
Did the initials SS mean anything to you?
Maybe? I can't really say. You'll have to excuse me, Mr. Fordham. I've got quite a lot on my mind right now. If I can think of anything, I'll be sure to let you know.
Tell me about your son.
Charles is a good boy. Very quiet. Miriam had wanted a child almost from the moment we married. You know how women are when they have their hearts set on something. I saw no need to rush, but...
Nice to know you're not the only one. Hey, Miles.
The first 2 times Miriam was with child, she suffered some unfortunate accidents. She was devastated, as you can imagine. So when Charles finally came along, he turned out to be quite a blessing. I can't imagine what sort of depraved madman would take him from us like this. You must find him, Mr. Fordham.
I intend to, Mr. Harris. Tell me about yourself.
There isn't much to tell, really. My life has been fairly well publicized in the newspapers.
Let's pretend for a moment that I skip over the society pages.
Well, I'm an investor. My father Clyde runs Harris Construction Company, which I will someday inherit. Any other details about me are fairly trivial nonsense, I think.
Those are all the questions I had for now.
All right.
I have some questions for you if you're up to answering them, Mrs. Harris.
I'll try my best, Mr. Fordham.
Tell me what you know about your son's kidnapping.
Oh, my poor baby!
Mrs. Harris, I know this is difficult, but I need as much information as you can give me so I can bring your son back.
Yes, you're right. I have to stay strong. For Charles. It happened sometime between 6 and 8 last night, I think. Both my husband and I had gone out. Charles was in the care of his nanny, Mrs. Davis. I arrived home first, around 8:30, and that's when I found the scene in the nursery, as it was.
And what was it you found?
Mrs. Davis, unconscious in her chair, the broken window, and Charles missing from his crib. Malcolm arrived home shortly afterwards, around 9, and then immediately sent our butler, Mr. Havelock, to notify the police. We stayed up waiting for any contact from the kidnappers, but there was nothing.
Your husband mentioned he was out with friends last night. Where were you?
Oh, I was visiting with some of my friends. We gathered at one of their homes for a concert.
It seems hiding something from your spouse is an activity both Harrises partake in.
What can you tell me about Mrs. Davis?
Well, she's worked for us since Charles was born, a little over 6 months ago.
How did you come to employ her?
Malcolm's mother had a friend whose daughter she used to care for. She came highly recommended. We've never had any problems with her. She's always been a dream.
Where is she now?
In her room, I would guess. With Charles missing, there's little for her to do.
Where might I find her room?
There's a small building just around the back of the manor. Hers is the 4th door from the left.
Can you think of any reason why your son would be a target for kidnapping?
It could be that someone wants our money, or some lunatic who's angry about the new airship. My husband's an investor, and my father-in-law owns the company building it, you see. I just don't know, Mr. Fordham. Frankly, the fact that something like this could even happen is just terrifying.
I found this bit of torn fabric by the broken window. Do you know anything about it?
No, I've never seen it before. Do you think it was left by the kidnapper?
Perhaps. Did the initials SS mean anything to you?
No, I can't think of anyone or anything I know with those initials.
Tell me about your son.
Charles is our only child. He's such a good boy. Never makes a fuss. Always very sweet. Oh, Charles, you must be so frightened out there without your mother. Oh, please, Mr. Fordham, You have to bring him home.
I'll do my best. Tell me a bit about yourself, Mrs. Harris.
Mr. Fordham, my son has been kidnapped and is out there alone, terrified and confused. What could I possibly tell you that would make any difference to you finding him?
I suppose you're right, Mrs. Harris. My apologies if I upset you. That's all for now, Mrs. Harris.
Very well.
Miles, didn't you notice something a bit strange about the Harrises?
Quite a few things, actually. What are you referring to?
Their son was just kidnapped, yet they're each on their own side of the sitting room. Not comforting each other, not crying together. Nothing.
They're stuck-up rich people. Not exactly the type to show emotion.
Miles, you know I'm the most cynical person there is when it comes to their type. But this isn't normal behavior, even for snobs. This goes deeper than saving face. There's something going on between them. I think you should find out what. That's odd. Why is there a loose button in the crib? Yeah, I'm no expert on children, but it seems like it would be dangerous to have around an infant. If only the flower shop burglar was as easy to find as this clue was. Yeah, the kidnapper left the child's blanket behind. There doesn't appear to be any trace of the silver spoon, though. Nice mobile. Custom made, too. There'll be no mistaking what family this child comes from. Be careful not to cut yourself, Miles. I don't think the Harris family has ever seen blood that isn't blue. Look, you can see the balcony extends all the way around the side of the manor.
That would make it rather easy for someone to access this window from the outside.
No evidence of what was used to smash the glass, though. Who in their right mind would need that many drawers?
Let's see what we have here. A very poorly written letter addressed to Mr. Harris.
I don't suppose it's a letter of admiration.
On the contrary, the author seems quite upset.
It looks like a pile of women's clothes. Must belong to Mrs. Harris.
There's a handwritten note among the clothes.
Wardrobes are usually always full of wonderfully dark secrets. Mr. Harris's color selection is almost as drab as yours.
Let's see if there's anything of interest in any of the pockets.
So, Mr. Harris is a fan of the ponies, is he? I'm sure that's not causing him any trouble at all. Paperwork and receipts. Nothing particularly interesting here. Yeah, it seems like this is where Mrs. Harris keeps her unmentionables. I like the ones with the frills and the stitched cat. More lacy underthings. I wonder which Harris they belong to. An empty suitcase. I suppose Mr. Harris must travel every now and then. One thing is for certain. Mr. Harris uses entirely too much starch on his shirts. Fancy. Some poor servant's probably gonna get a flogging for leaving it in here, though.
I have some questions for you, Mr. Harris.
Yes, of course.
I found this button in your son's crib. Does it look familiar at all?
No, not at all. Do you think the kidnapper might have left it behind?
It's a distinct possibility. I found this letter in your bedroom. What can you tell me about it?
You went through our things?
I'm a private investigator, Mr. Harris. It's part of my job.
Of all the insolence!
You're upset, I know, but do you want me to find your son or don't you?
Yes, of course I do. That letter was sent to me by mistake. It was written to my father. Well, if you can even call that writing.
Have I ever mentioned how much I hate rich people? Because I really hate rich people.
Your father. Doesn't he own the company building the new airship?
Yes, that's right. He's been receiving many letters just like that one since the Lygia disaster. But that Devons fellow in particular has sent one every week, along with a bag of chicken bones and dust.
How peculiar.
Not only that, he leads a daily protest in front of the construction yard where the HMS Lenore is being built, trying to halt production. My God! How did I not see this before?
See what?
Devons! He has a grudge against this family because of what happened with the Lygia. I'd put money on him being involved with the kidnapping somehow, as a form of retaliation.
I'll just have to speak with Mr. Devons and see for myself. How goes the construction of the new airship?
There have been some complications, but nothing we can't handle.
Could you be a bit more specific?
Well, I already told you about the trouble with protesters at the yard, and we're blocked pending Royal Maverick's review of the safety regulations for the prototype etheric diffusion engines. Agitators and red tape aside, we should still be on schedule to have the Lenore finished and in the air by the end of the year. But really, Mr. Fordham, what the deuce does this have to do with finding Charles?
He has a point, you know.
Mr. Harris, what can you tell me about these?
What? How did you...
Listen, I'm trying to help you and your family. I can't do it if I don't get the entire truth.
Do you think we could discuss this somewhere more private?
I suppose we could.
Good. Let's move to the nursery then.
I have some questions. I found this note in your bedroom. What can you tell me about it?
What? You had no right to go through my things?
Mrs. Harris, I'm just trying to find your son. The sooner I know about any clues I might find, the faster I can proceed with my investigation.
Fine. I got that note last night from Roland.
Who is Roland?
Roland is a special friend.
I see.
Oh, don't you judge me, Mr. Fordham. You have no idea what my marriage has been like. Marrying Malcolm wasn't my idea, nor even his. The whole thing was orchestrated by our fathers. They thought merging the two families would be a good business arrangement.
Is your marriage an unhappy one, then?
It wasn't easy at first, and it didn't get any easier as it went on, either.
So then, why not end it?
Mr. Fordham, we are a respectable family. There are certain considerations. Besides, I had no legal grounds. For all his faults, Malcolm is a very faithful man. Almost frustratingly so. Then, somewhat unexpectedly, we had Charles. At least that made things bearable.
I'm sorry for you, Mrs. Harris, I really am. But I think I should talk to this Roland.
Why? He has nothing to do with this.
That's for me to decide. Where can I find him?
I don't know. I've never been to his home. We usually meet at a hotel.
Can you tell me anything that would help me track him down?
Well, he's a musician. He plays the piano at some clubs in Gascon, but I don't know which for sure.
How about his last name?
I don't know that either.
I gather you don't talk much.
I refuse to answer that question, Mr. Fordham.
It's a good thing I don't have a stomach anymore, because I can guarantee you its contents would be on the floor right now.
I found this button in your son's crib. Does it look familiar at all?
No, I don't recognize it. It looks like it came from some cheap coat. Is that what the ruffian who took my baby was wearing?
That's what I'm trying to determine. That's all for now, Miss.
Very well.
Shall we continue our conversation, Mr. Harris?
Yes, of course.
Now that your wife is out of earshot, tell me about the kidnapping and what these betting stubs have to do with it.
Right. As I said before, it had already happened when I got home. I had just come from spending the evening at the meadows.
I see. I take it your wife isn't impressed by your hobby?
I promised her weeks ago that I would stop going, but I've had such a good streak lately. The last thing I wanted was to upset her further, yet it would be foolish of me to just give up on something so promising.
Can you think of anyone who might want to do you harm by taking your son?
Several, I'm afraid.
Go on.
I haven't exactly had the best of luck, Mr. Fordham. That's why this latest streak was so important to me. The truth is, I've gambled away most of my money. I've had to take out several loans so Miriam doesn't get suspicious. If she ever found out, it would be over. I can't lose her, Mr. Fordham. I just can't.
Where have I heard this before? You know, things would be so much easier if people just talked to each other.
I've tried doing business above board, but lately I've had to seek other resources.
What do you mean?
I was forced to visit a lending office. The owner was a rather shady Sambo, but I figured he'd be easier to deal with than the usual sheenies that run those type of places.
Can you believe this guy? Maybe we should just leave the kid be. He'd probably be better raised by wolves.
Who was the owner?
Mr. LeFay. I didn't bother to get his first name. His business is an abattoir row in Chumley. Horrid place, but I was desperate.
You think this Mr. LeFay may have taken your son as collateral?
Let's just say there isn't much those type of people wouldn't do to put a crown in their pocket.
Those are all the questions I had for now.
All right. If you don't mind, Mr. Fordham, I'm going back to the living room. I don't want Miriam getting suspicious.
Hello, sir. Welcome to LeFay Lenders. I'm the owner, Chester LeFay. Are you looking to take out a loan?
Not today, I'm afraid. I'm Miles Fordham, a private investigator.
Look, I don't know what you've heard, but I run a clean business here. I don't need any trouble.
And I'm not here to cause any, for the moment.
Just keep your nose where it belongs, and we should get along fine.
Mr. LeFay, I'd like to ask you some questions.
Fine, but keep it brief.
Tell me what you know about Malcolm Harris.
Ah, Mr. Harris. Took out a loan about a month ago. Still hasn't paid me back. In fact, he sent along a letter yesterday saying he was having an emergency and needed more time. I probably should have refused to do business with him. As soon as he walked through the door, I could tell his type.
What type is that?
Upper class, bored with his life, trying to escape and doing it through vice. In his case, gambling.
This guy is good. Maybe you can pursue money lending if the whole private investigator thing doesn't work out.
But for some reason, I pitied him and decided to give him the loan anyway. Compassion isn't exactly an asset in this business, you see.
Nothing to worry about in your case, then.
Aside from that, I don't know anything about him. I prefer to keep how much I know about my clients to a minimum. Makes things easier for me.
Exactly how much did Mr. Harris borrow from you?
Is that relevant to your investigation?
It would help to have an idea of exactly how much he owes you, yes.
I don't feel comfortable telling you the exact amount, but I will say it was over 500 crowns.
A considerable sum.
Like I said, I probably shouldn't have done it, but I'll get the money back one way or another.
What's your policy regarding people who don't pay their loans back?
There are a few options. For the first 3 months or so, I'll send them a letter reminding them. After that, I start to threaten them with legal action. You wouldn't believe some of the things people do to avoid paying back their loans. One client went so far as to fake his own death.
Do you ever employ any more unusual methods?
If you're implying that I do anything illegal, Mr. Fordham, you're mistaken. Look, I have a family to consider. I'm not about to go get my hands dirty when there's plenty of legitimate ways to handle the situation.
Are you aware that Malcolm's son Charles was kidnapped last night?
I had no idea he even had a son. As I said, I don't ask my clients too many personal questions. Though now you've told me, I suppose that would explain the emergency he mentioned in his letter. Poor guy.
Take a look at this piece of fabric. Does it look familiar to you?
Sure, it looks like it came from a jacket. In fact, yes, it's the same fabric as the jacket I'm wearing.
Would you mind if I took a look at your jacket?
Sure, not a problem. Here. No tears in mine, huh?
Not a one. You clearly take good care of your clothing.
I don't mean to discourage you, Mr. Fordham, but I've seen a lot of people with this style of jacket. Hell, even Malcolm has one. I remember he was wearing it when he came in here.
I see. Thank you for the information, Mr. LeFay.
You don't suppose... How about that?
It matches the piece of torn fabric perfectly.
So, this means...
It could mean many things. The only thing that's certain is that a piece of this jacket ended up on the floor of the nursery.
Seems like something worth asking Mr. Harris about.
I have some questions.
Yes,
Mr. Harris, do you recall the torn piece of fabric I found in the nursery?
yes, what about it?
As it turns out, one of the jackets in your wardrobe has a tear exactly the same size and shape as this one. Would you care to tell me how that happened?
That can't be.
I'm afraid it is, so explain it.
I have no explanation. The truth is, I haven't worn that jacket in weeks. I've no idea how it was torn.
Are you suggesting someone else took your jacket and wore it when the child was taken?
I don't know. Perhaps someone is trying to make it look as though I... But that's absurd. Why would I kidnap my own son?
Why indeed, Mr. Harris.
You really think he kidnapped his own son, Miles? Seems more likely he was set up. But he also doesn't strike me as a terribly good parent. Maybe it would serve him right to be blamed for this. We've done our part. The police can handle the search for the missing baby.
Those are all the questions.
All right.
Hello, dearest. I have returned.
Hello, Miles.
Addie?
What do you need, dear?
Addie, did you ever work with or meet a musician in Gascon named Roland?
Roland?
Yes, a piano player.
Oh, of course. That's gotta be Roland Devereaux. Yes, I know him. I'd just as soon never hear the name again, if I'm being honest.
That bad, huh?
He's just an arrogant little twerp, completely full of himself, thinks he's God's gift to music. He really isn't very good. Misses notes like you wouldn't believe. Used to throw me off the few times I sang with him.
Well, he's a person of interest in my current case. Any idea where I can find him?
Last I heard, he was playing a regular gig at the Crimson Cat, but that was a few years ago. If he's not still there, they might know where he went.
Thanks, dear. That's incredibly helpful.
My pleasure.
I can't believe the nerve of that narrow-minded old cow.
Who, Mrs. Delacroix? She's actually one of my nicest clients.
I don't know how you can tolerate her. If I were you, I'd strike her off my list.
If I did that for every one of my clients who thought the same as her, I'd be out of a job. That's just the way it is.
Maybe so, but it doesn't make it any less infuriating. You weren't kidding about business picking up. You're averaging what, about 3 appointments per day?
More like 5. I told you, debutante ball season's busy.
Doesn't it get tiresome?
Not really. You'd be surprised at the sort of gossip I hear from my clients. I don't know what it is, but they just open up to me and tell me all kinds of personal things. You sure you don't want me to give you a trim?
I'm fine for now, dear. Thank you. I'd forgotten how good you are at écarté. You absolutely destroyed me the other night.
As I recall, you used to hold your own pretty well.
We should have another match soon. That way I can hone my skills.
Yes, we should. As long as you can concentrate, I'm sure you'll get as good as you used to be.
How are things going with you?
I'm a bit worried about some rumors I've been hearing.
Oh?
They're saying it won't be long before automated hairdressing devices are available to the public. Once that happens, it's going to be tough for me to keep getting jobs.
Automated hairdressing devices? How would those even work? Do they read your mind?
Doubtful. More than likely they'll have some kind of settings or just give everyone the same type of hairstyle.
I wouldn't worry too much, Addie. You're the best hairdresser in town. I doubt people will place their trust in some contraption over you.
You underestimate my clientele, Miles. They're mostly all rich socialites whose hobbies are buying the most expensive and modern things just to outdo their peers. They'll be sending their servants to line up for days before the things are released.
Perhaps, but they'll come running back to you once the machines stop working. You'll see.
I certainly hope so.
I'll let you get back to your book.